Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Marketing Gets Real. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a detour and shift away from our traditional marketing discussions because we have someone here that has a ton of knowledge to share with us about something that is critical to all organizations, and that's culture. We're also going to highlight a successful woman entrepreneur, surprise, surprise, and learn from her successes and challenges. So we're really excited to have Gemma Hood join us. Yay, Gemma!
Hi, hello. Thank you for having me.
Gem is the founder and CEO of Culturehood. I love the name. You'll have to fill us in on where you got that, but super, super clever. And Culturehood is a boutique people consulting firm focused on building engaged and successful company cultures, which we'll be able to dive into a little bit on what she recommends that organizations look at as they're thinking about uplifting their culture. Gem lives in the people and culture world and is known for guiding workplaces to be awesome by building company cultures that people actually love. Imagine that. From startups to big name tech and finance companies, she's worked with all kinds of businesses. And throughout her career, she's tackled setting company values, building employer brands, hiring the right people, keeping everyone happy and healthy, and making sure that everyone feels welcome and included. How amazing is that? And her work has been recognized with organizations like Campaign's Best Place to Work and Sunday Times Best Companies to Work For. Awesome. And then near and dear to our heart, she also is a mentor for young women in technology and helping them to excel in their careers. And Dana and I are huge fans of that. So let's welcome Gem. It's such a treat to have you today.
Hello, thank you so much. Thank you. And you explaining that, I think sometimes where you're going at 100 miles an hour, when you have somebody then talk back to you, you think, oh my goodness, actually, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Is that me?
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if we have a chance, we can talk about imposter syndrome, right?
Because God, I could talk about it till the cows come home. Jesus. Yeah.
Dana and I are big fans of fake it till you make it, but I think imposter syndrome is a whole nother level.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's yeah, I could talk about it till the cows come home, and it's amazing. It's amazing how many people actually do suffer with it, and the impact that it can have on even, I mean, we'll probably talk about it later, but just setting up my business, it became more apparent that I certainly suffer from it, but also the learnings in terms of how you try and combat it as well. It takes time.
Yeah. And I think men actually feel it too, right? I don't think it's only women, although I think women tend to be a little quieter about it than men are. And I think I read a study about where women will look at the job description and be like, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can kind of do that. Well, men will be like, I've done this. It's close enough. So yeah, I can do all those things, right?
They're much more risk averse, aren't they? Well, that's why, this is why I do what I do from a mentoring perspective, because there are so many women who will think, I can't do that. I can't do 100% of that role. So I'm just not going to bother putting myself forward, or I'm not going to have my voice heard. Whereas I think men will naturally just go, well, sod it, let's try. Let's just see. Let's see if it works.
Yeah, and I can do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Which is sad, because you do get a lot of women who can do it, but they just don't have themselves forward, which is really sad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Gem, besides being our agency president's dear friend, and we all love Lindsay, I bet you guys have so much fun together. Why don't you go ahead and give us kind of the trail of, decisions that kind of got you to where you are and being the CEO of Culturehood?
Sure. So, blimey, where do I start? So I started up, I've lived life in agency world from day dot. When I first started my career, I went in as client services, And I was then lucky enough within that business to have many different careers within the creative department, and then I spent time as within operations. And I don't know what it was, but the business was growing quite quickly, and I had a thing that was pulling me towards. There's something about this business, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is. And it, at the time, now I know it was employee engagement and it was company culture. And I said to the CEO at the time, and again, going back to what we were talking about earlier about imposter syndrome, I have no idea where this voice came from. But I essentially said to the CEO, your business is growing really quickly, and I think you need someone to look after your company culture and this DNA piece that's keeping people happy and motivated and productive. And he said, oh, let's put you through your your CIPD, which is the UK version of your HR qualification, essentially. So I did that at the same time as still doing a full-time role within, I was head of design team. I'm not a designer. I'm not a creative director in any shape or form, but I was managing the team. And I managed to work out quite quickly that if I understand you as a person, I understand what motivates you, I can actually get even better quality of work out of you. You're putting in extra effort because I actually have an interest in you as a person, and this is working. So it was that kind of fueled me to then look more into people and culture and the importance of company culture. Anyway, fast forward a little bit more into that. The company was, let's say, it wasn't toxic, but there was elements that we really needed to focus on. So there were things that I was uncovering, going, my God, we've not got this. Let's make sure we do this. Let's make sure we do that. But also the business was pivoting from being a purely creative design agency to be a more tech-focused conversational AI business. So we were attracting a different breed. We were trying to retain and train a different breed of person. So company culture was really integral to ensuring that we weren't spending a load of money on potentially people moving on. We were retraining people internally, but also we were attracting talent and not having to use recruitment agents. So I was part of that, and that's how we ended up getting our Best Companies to Work For awards. So then I became Chief Operating Officer. I was Chief People Officer by that point, and I became Chief Operating Officer. And I thought, you know what? Okay, I can do this, Chief Operating. I can do this, operations. I know the agency. I know how agencies work. It's fine. Let's go for this. So did it. But my heart was still very much in people, culture. And what I was doing, I built a people and culture team, and they were taking it away. Not taking it away, and that sounds really bad, but it was almost, I was focusing on the operational side from a utilization perspective for the business profitability, and I wanted to be focusing on company culture and employee engagement. Anyway, so COVID hit. I had my two babbies, and I had my second, and I decided that actually I think I'm going to go for it. I think I'm going to set up my own business. And it was probably the best decision I made from a timing perspective, because everybody was, what it was like. People were just thrown onto these digital islands, not too sure what to do. How do I keep my people engaged? From a wellness perspective. So for me, it was a huge opportunity for me to essentially say, if you want a bit of what I did with this business over here, I reckon I can help you do that. So I went on a wonderful accelerator program, which helped me with setting up the nuts and bolts of my business and how to do that. And then just went for it from there, really. And that was coming up for 4 years ago. And yeah, that's kind of a bit of a potted history in terms of how I got to where I got to. But yeah.
Love that story. That's fantastic. Clearly you're really passionate about culture, and I know we're going to dive into the details here, but let's talk a little bit about why you do what you do. What's there's a transition there, right? From a lot of what Cari and I do and Lindsay does in terms of managing the agency, but you really took a slightly different direction.
Yeah. So There's a kind of, so when I first set up Culturehood, I wanted to do things differently. I don't fall into being seen as a outsourced HR practitioner. And I wanted to position Culturehood as being a real focus on people and company culture. And how do I do that? So I'm a massive believer in giving people a voice, listening to people, communication, transparency, honest communication. And with that, you build trust. And once you've got that trust, that you can have lots of different people initiatives in place that can make people happy, but it isn't necessarily going to make them engaged. So I guess my underlying kind of thing is, how can we ensure that we're listening to people? How can we ensure we're giving people a voice? And then we build a people roadmap in and around that. So when I first set up Culturehood, I really focused on how can we go through a discovery phase where it extracts where we're doing really, really well, where perhaps we have some opportunities to raise the bar even further and to improve things even further. And what does that roadmap look like? So I'm almost a bit of let's open up what's going on within your business. Let's look at what your business objectives are. And if you want your people to be rowing in that direction, we need them on that journey with us. And by me going through a discovery phase where I open up everything and go, let's look at your employment life cycle. Let's look at I do an engagement survey. Let's look at what your people are saying, which are all focused on key engagement factors. So that, in answer to your question, it goes back to giving people a voice, building trust, and building really genuinely positive company cultures that aren't just lip service. Because there's so many I scratch surfaces of, and you then start to lift the bonnet. You go, yeah, you're saying you do this stuff, but you don't, because your people aren't really genuinely happy. They aren't genuinely engaged, because there's so many things that are missing, and you need to look at that full package.
Yeah. Well, and I know we're going to talk about this later, right, Cari? But I think Kim said to us, our HR person recently, she used that word engaged over happiness as we're trying to set some culture goals. And that was kind of new for me. And I think you too, Cari, right?
Yeah.
And that framing of it that way. And I've heard you say it several times. So Cari, are you cool if we jump ahead a little bit?
Yeah,
I would just, because it felt like a good time.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the difference, like in your eyes, between engaged and happy?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember who it was that said it, but it was happiness is, I guess it's an abstract feeling, isn't it? And I see it as being a bit of an adrenaline shot. So you can make people happy by doing things like free fruit. Let's make sure that we do yoga classes in the morning, or let's make sure that all the little things that are just there that make people happy, but it's an adrenaline shot. It's just a really quick snap. And then it's, okay, well, what's the next? What's the next thing? And then what I see is leaders are going, what else can we add in? What can we possibly, and especially, I think with the experience I've had within agencies, it got to the point, I think it's better now because you're having to be more authentic as leaders, but there are a lot of agencies who would go, okay, I've got a pool table and I've got this and we've got that and we can provide this and free lunches and da-da-da. But actually, when you look at the underneath of what's going on, are your people really engaged? Are they putting in the discretionary effort because they really buy into the purpose of your business and where you're heading and the values and having an impact and making a difference? And I see that as being a real difference. And also to add to that, I think that there's an element of, you can sometimes get somebody who you get this where you get burnout, where people are trying to find that happiness, and actually, are they ever going to find it? Because is that business really truly providing all the elements that would make you truly engage within that business? So I see that a lot, where you get people who are genuinely not happy, but they're staying with a business because they're almost searching for that happiness, which can actually be a detrimental thing to that person's wellness and the business as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, happiness is fleeting, right? And when you talk about engaged, what was going through my mind is somebody that genuinely cares, right? So they care about the output of what they're doing. They care about the company and its success. They care about their teammates and their success. And it is different when you describe it, Gem, than, happiness, because, happiness is fleeting.
Yeah, I know. And there's a report done by Gallup, which was that 90% of UK employees are disengaged from their job. So they are doing what they're effectively doing is quiet quitting. So they have already checked out. They're disengaged. And I just think, God, you've got that high percentage of 90% within the UK, but they might have short elements of going, okay, well, today made me happy. Okay, cool. But it's not sustainable, is it? So I agree with what you're saying. Your HR person that supports you guys, yeah. Looking at happiness, if I'm looking at engagement surveys, looking at how happy people are, it's more about how engaged are you in this business, the purpose and where we're heading and what we're doing is really crucial.
Yeah.
And do you believe that's top down? So when you talk about, obviously you're recruiting differently, right? You're probably onboarding differently. But Dana and I have worked in tech for a long time. So, it's not uncommon to go into any tech company that's got, foosball tables and, gourmet food and chefs and,
which is really lovely, by the way.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, Google has some amazing campus. Yeah. Dana and I toured it and they have like bicycle doctors and they've got massage therapists and, it's amazing. Yeah. But I would imagine that, all of it is moot if there's not a belief at the leadership level in this kind of cultivation of engagement.
Yeah, totally. I've worked with a couple of organizations where you have the leadership team who don't necessarily, this is before I start working with them, obviously, but there's definitely a silo between that of, well, this is what we believe and this is how we lead it by example. And I'm not so sure I'm going to get so engaged and so involved in what's happening day to day. And how do I explain? From a people initiative perspective, if they're not in it, if they're not involved in it, then it becomes a little bit disingenuous. It doesn't become real. It doesn't become part of the fabric of that organization. So having leaders part of the deeper elements that all form part of a positive employee experience and employee engagement, it doesn't necessarily, it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to do and embed.
Yeah. Do you think too that overall, I mean, we talked earlier in this season definitely about generations and, the younger workforce coming up is also looking for something different, right? In work. Like, I think at least in what I was taught at my age and where I'm at is, women were after a career. And so I feel like in order to get a career, we had to work really hard to get there, right? And we had to get ahead of men. We had to do all these things. So this idea of work-life balance, all these things, that like never entered my world, right? It was like, I'm going to work to what I need to work towards. And it feels like just the younger generation as a whole, like, and even what you're saying that the lunches and the pool tables, all of that, it's not as important to them. They're looking for a little more freedom, right? Not being in the office, maybe more time off. I mean, so are you seeing that too? Is that
massively so? Yeah. So, you're, I guess, measured on output rather than input. Mm-hmm. And I also think just going back one step further. So I recently did a talk on open, honest and transparent communication within an organization, how that has to be a foundation. And you can have all these other bells and whistles that if you don't have that, the other stuff falls apart. So things like, for example, Glassdoor. Glassdoor has provided the opportunity for employees to rate how good or bad it is to work for that employer. So leaders are having to step up. It's all very well saying, let's put all these extra bits in place. But actually, when it comes to what's it like, would you recommend the CEO? What's it like to work within this organization? What are the pros? What are the cons? We're providing employees, or they have an opportunity to give feedback on that. So we're almost you're having to create a really transparent and open and authentic company culture, authentic being a really key word there. That if you don't, then people are just going to vote either with pressing a button because actually it's virtual, I work virtually, it's going to be much easier for me to go off to so-and-so. And so I think leaders are having to work much, much harder, and it has to go on a much deeper level. Going back to that remote piece as well, because you don't have people in the office as much, those bonds and those relationships aren't as deep as they used to be. So you're having to look at that wider piece as to what are the factors that are going to really engage you and keep you within this business longer term. But yeah, back to your point about the shift in what people want, I think there's a less of, I mean, I remember when I started work, I started doing work experience in London. I had done my graphic design degree, and it was like, I need to get some work experience. It was unpaid, but as long as I can prove myself that I'm worth them having within the business, then I just kept going and going and going. That mentality's completely shifted now, hasn't it? It's very much, what can you do for me? Because actually I've got elements outside of work where perhaps I'm giving back to the local community, or I've got a bit of a side hustle going on. If you really want me, you have to work harder to have me to work for your business. And I just think it's really interesting, that shift of Gen Z's coming through.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it is interesting. And I think in the States here, Gem, it feels like, at least in tech, it's like this, right? You know, right now we are at a very different place than we were 9 months ago, right? 9 months ago, we were throwing everything we could to keep people, we collectively. And now, you know, the jobs are just not there. And I have a lot of friends that are out of work or looking, you know, so it's kind of this, there's the economic piece, you know, that I don't know. It's a little conflicting with what you just said, because, you know, people need jobs and they're not there now, right? And so you lose like your bargaining to be able to say, I want all these things. I want to be able to, you know, put dinner on the table for my family, right?
Yeah, but Cari, I think there's a weird holdout going on too. Like you guys, literally, my 18-year-old just got it. So I was thinking about this. He doesn't have a job. He quit his job, took some months off, was looking for a part-time job, just got a job, but he turned down a job in there. He was like, there is the younger generation is like, I'm going to hold out even though I don't have money. And we don't understand that, right? Because we go, I would never, right? I would never be in a position where I couldn't pay my bills. But there's a really different mentality, whether they should be working or shouldn't, you know, like they're like, no, I'm worth this. I'm going to hold out. And we'd be like, just take a job.
Yeah. But he's living at home, Dana, right?
No,
I mean, that's
I agree,
different.
but I do think though, people are more willing since COVID, oddly enough, to, even though they don't have a job, to sit. So I don't know if they have savings built up. I don't know if they're more willing to put stuff on credit card, but it's not this like I have to take anything. I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting.
I wonder also if there's an element of people, your careers, what I would call, are slightly squiggly. It's not so much where especially when I first started, it was you start here and you work your way up. I think that your careers now, it's much easier for people to have squiggly careers and go into different career options and to train themselves. The access that we have to content, being able to retrain yourself in certain things. So I think that's also an element that comes into that, in that, again, organizations are having to work a little bit harder to ensure that they're providing their employees with the performance, what I would call performance enablement. So the growth opportunities, the learning and development, that I see a lot. And if organizations aren't providing that, again, employees will either quit or they're out. They're off to the next one who are providing more.
I think that's real. I think, I mean, Cari, you've got the quote down more than I do, but we had a gal on the podcast, I think it was last week, who talks about, I'd much rather train somebody, the thumbs up thing. I was not doing thumbs up, but yeah. Well, so, Cari, what did Meg say?
Let's see, hang on. So it's, we don't care what you know as much as we care how you think.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
And it's true because Cari and I've talked about, I would hire somebody without a college degree in a heartbeat if I believe I can teach them, because, we've got people coming, at least in the US, Gem, and I don't know how it is in the UK, but, we've got a big problem in education and how kids are coming out, and especially in marketing with gaps. And so it's like, if I'd rather train them the way to do marketing the way they should, versus what the university, if they're the strategic thinker, right? And they're entrepreneurial and all of these other things.
Yeah. It's that growth mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that I'm open to, I'm going to be a sponge, I'm not going to be a rock. And it's a mindset thing. And I think if you can find that person that is spongy, then that is really great, because they can train. They've got the right mindset, and they're open to that learning and development piece, for sure. So I love it.
It's the critical thinking and problem solving. But the soft skills are so important. You guys will love this story. So my son is a software engineer. He's brilliant. He called me this weekend and asked me, he had to write an email to his landlord asking him to be a reference for his new landlord, because he and his boyfriend are moving. So he said he had sat there for 20 minutes, and he called me, and literally I had 10 things going on, and I was like, just say blah 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 blah. And he was like, Mom, you are so brilliant, thank you, I would have spent another hour on this. And I was like, So critical thinking in some ways does not translate, right? I mean, I was laughing so hard. I came out of my bedroom and told my husband, and he's like, yeah.
But just on that though, I mean, I don't know whether we're digressing, but, and stop me if we are, but so when I work with, my clients and we're looking at communication internally, one of the things that I do is have you ever heard of disc profiling? So you have, so the psychometric testing. And for me, that is absolute gold dust, because what I'm essentially saying is, let's all have a little bit of empathy for one another and what we bring to the table. Because we all have our different ways of thinking, different ways of being, but we have to recognize that in others, that that we all work in very different ways. So we're on a journey, we're going somewhere, but we're all going to get there in our own way. And there'll be different people who bring different things. And isn't that wonderful that we have such a diverse team? And so I run these workshops. And when I run these workshops, it's almost like this light bulb moment of people going, oh, now I know that's why and why sometimes I need to focus on the detail. And because you're such a driver, you're so focused on the goal, and perhaps sometimes you forget about the emotional part of that element and what impact that had. So it's amazing that, it's really good that you have that diversity within a team, but showcasing within a team that diversity is really good at bringing teams together.
Is that part of your engagement consulting kind of approach? That's a really great idea. I know that some organizations, I know Microsoft used to do this, I don't know if they still do, but they would have a plaque, like you're an ENFJ or whatever, or where your disc was. And so that somebody would know how to approach you and what, to get what they need from a collaboration perspective.
And I think a key point to that is that if you're going to run something like that, is making sure that it's embedded back to the authenticity piece. So if I run what I would call a communication module, where I've perhaps worked with a client, we've done a discovery phase, and I've identified that your communication within your business could be better. So perhaps you're lacking in top-down communication, peer-to-peer, and bottom-up communication. And as part of that module, I'll say we need to focus on communication. I'll say, let's run some disc profiling. Let's understand one another first before we then move into this next element of. But then what I do with the disc profiling is I say, right, how are we going to incorporate that into reward and recognition? How are we going to incorporate that into performance enablement, into the career discussions, your one-to-ones you're having, into onboarding, how we welcome people, how we recruit people? So it's locked in to helping build relationships with people and helping that you get the best out of one another.
I would would imagine that's so helpful in this remote environment too, right? Because I think, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, people aren't as close, but it's also like everybody's moving so fast that the communication starts lacking the empathy at all, right? It's not intentional. It's everybody is, and because you're not seeing somebody, it's really easy to send a Slack or an email that doesn't speak to somebody the way that we would normally do it, if we were in person or in a conversation like this.
Because you lose, and I hate to say this, but you lose the water cooler conversations, don't you? Where you get to know that person. And as you get to a certain size as a business, what I see where I work with the smaller organizations, it's much, much easier to keep that communication and relationship building. It's much easier. As you get big, you have to be much, much more proactive. You have to be putting things in place, infrastructure in place that's going to help encourage that communication. And therefore trust, employee engagement.
Okay, so I'm going to back it up a little bit. So we've talked about employee culture, but I'm going to go back to some of the entrepreneur stuff just because that is fun. So we kind of started our business around the same time as you, about a year before, just right before COVID hit. And so we all know it's exciting and challenging, sometimes soul sucking, scary. Make good decisions, make bad decisions. My sister just launched her own business and I was mentoring her this weekend. We were laughing. She's like, it's really scary. She's like, I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills. I was like, yeah, it is. And I'd love to tell you it changes, but it doesn't.
It does. It's like, geez, But that's what keeps me going, isn't it?
Right?
That's the fire, that's the fuel. And I think, if you don't have that, I think sometimes we talked about imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's a bit of a silver lining, because if you didn't have that, then it wouldn't push you, as long as it doesn't go too far. But it becomes that catalyst, doesn't it? I've just got to keep going.
Yeah, totally. A little bit more if I do one more thing. But tell us a little bit about some of your ups and downs over the last 4 years.
So I think there's two that I can think of. So I'd say the first one, the biggest challenge for me was when I first started Culturehood. I'd actually come out of maternity leave, and the hardest thing I found was almost saying to my husband, although I'm very, very lucky, my husband's incredibly helpful. It was almost like you've got to give me some time. I'm going to do this, but I can't be the default. And what I mean by that is I can't be just because I'm running my own business doesn't mean that I'm the one that's going to always go do pickups. I'm the one that's always going to be, when baby is unwell, that it defaults to me. I'm going to take this seriously, and this is going to be, for me, a full-time job. So I found that really difficult to try and sort of, when I said I was going to launch Culturehood and I was going to start my own business, it was almost like, okay, so it's a lifestyle thing, is it? Is it so that you can look after the children? No. This is it. This is me. I'm going. This is. Oh, right. Okay. So I think I found that quite difficult in having to almost prove to people that no, this is serious. This is me setting up my own business, and maybe it's because I just come off maternity leave. I don't know, but there was that assumption of, oh, so you're doing it because you've got 2 children. No. But if anything, that was really good, because it became much more of a fuel for me to go, do you know what, I've got to make this work. And I've said to my husband that I'm not the default, so I have to make sure that I get as many clients as possible quickly and fill my time. So there was that element that I felt was a bit of a challenge. The other element was that it's more of a recent one, in that I slipped into, and maybe because it was a comfort zone thing, I slipped into, when I bring a client on board, I need to make sure that I have them as a retained client. And what was happening was I had worked out what that would look like from a retainer basis perspective. But I started to slip into, am I an employee? Am I in this business, or am I external? And because it's people, it's culture, it's employee engagement, I was getting sucked in. And what was happening was, as I was over servicing, and Of course, I want to go above and beyond, and you want to deliver. Back to imposter syndrome. Yeah, you're over service because you think, well, if I don't do this, then I might lose you as a client. So I kind of fell into this element of thinking, I'm working so many hours. If I was then to work out what I'm actually, if I was able to, I can't bring any more clients on board. I need to re-engineer this and re-look at it rather than looking at it as a comfortable retainer. Have retainers, but start to re-look at how I provide my services as more projects. So that's when I looked at, well, once I've done my discovery piece and we've worked out what your core people and culture roadmap looks like, let's look at them as modules. So my modules are my projects where I go, this is what we need to improve on because we know we've got a score of based on this particular area. We need to make sure we improve that. So let's look at that as a module, and that module will take me X amount of time. So there's a start and an end. And so that for me was quite a learning curve. Whereas I just thought, well, I'll just take on a load of retained clients and surely that's just going to be the way that it is. And that I'd say was my biggest, or the most recent, but one of the biggest learning curves that I've had.
I think that's interesting because we struggle with retainers too. And it's because I think there's a couple challenges with it, right? We want the consistent revenue as business owners because it helps you sleep at night.
Well,
and right. And right. And so we've got this, but what we find often too is we get to an end of retainer and we struggle with proving our value because similar to what you're saying, right? Our team becomes an extension of theirs and they're just doing. But we didn't necessarily accomplish what we said we needed to at the beginning because we slip into these routines and these roles. And so it's when it's project based and it's defined, we can go, we did this project, right? And we can show you what we did. It's really a tough one, right?
What I try and do, and again, it goes back to this, what I now do, it goes back to that proving value piece and it helps me go, okay, I've had impact, I've delivered. I will start to look at the people metrics because the language of leaders is very much, what is your impact going to have on my bottom line?
Right.
And that sometimes is quite difficult to prove when it comes to culture and employee engagement.
Yeah.
So looking at things like, what does your ENPS score? I don't know if you've ever come across NPS, yes, but the ENPS is similar but from an employee perspective. Mm-hmm. But I'll run let's look at your ENPS now. And that will give me a score, which I'll say, let's start chipping away at that. Let's look at what does your employee turnover look like? But then what does that translate into cost? And how much are you spending with recruitment agents? And then when I start to look at that and then I communicate that, we've never really looked at how much we're spending when it comes to recruitment agents and what impact that has if we have X amount of people leaving, or how long it takes to recruit, the productivity dip that you have in trying to get new people in. So I have to really talk their language to resonate. But really my undercurrent is let's create really, really great places to work. Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to this is the first thing you said, because I think as women, it's real. So you said to your husband, I can't be the de facto. And I think probably common, Cari and I both, Cari's husband, I know, traveled a lot when her kids were younger, but we've all got to have really good partners, I think, as women in order to do what we do, because I do think the trend in the world is that women are responsible for everything that's related to the kids, taking to the doctors, picking them up from school, these things. And, I'm very lucky. My husband does a lot of it, more than I do. I couldn't do what I do if he didn't, right? But I think, it does make it harder for women, I think, to do what it is that we do.
Do you think there's also an element of we almost can't help it? and what I mean by that is I get mum guilt. I get them really, really bad. If I haven't done enough, I will beat myself up thinking I've not spent enough time with the kids. I need to make sure that I'm doing more. So you then get the mum guilt. You then get the work guilt. And you're like, there's never a happy medium. So you're constantly like, am I working enough? Am I doing enough to bring more clients on board? But am I also doing enough when it comes to the kids and home life and being a mum and being a wife? So I don't know if there's a certain element where we maybe put too much pressure on ourselves anyway. I know I do. You set unrealistic goals, don't you? And
And I would add that I would want to do those things too, right? Pickup was my favorite time because it's where I had the one-on-one time to chat about the day, and, you get little nuggets and things like that. But then again, I've got meetings. And so, hiring a nanny remember we talked, one of our previous podcast guests was my former nanny.
That's so cool.
So, and what she mainly did was shuffling the kids around, making sure they got their homework done, stuff like that, which is what I would have loved to do. But, it's conflicting, right?
Yeah, it is hard.
Well, I had a therapist once, and I remember sitting in there and I was listing off all of the things you have to do. And I remember she looked at me and she goes, "You can't do it all." So she's like, "You're worried about doing the work, doing the kids, and then making, I think it was about, I can't cook healthy dinners." And she goes, "Throw a damn pizza on the table. That's what most people do." And I'm like, "But that's not healthy." And she's like, "Dana, something's got to give." So this idea that I think people have told us women, you can do it all, right? And really, you can't. Nobody can do it all. Something has got to give, right?
And I think social media has got a lot to do with that as well. I mean, you go through Instagram and I'm like, oh my God, how do they do all that? They've got these. They look perfect. They've got the most amazing faces, beautiful hair. Kids look, it's all like perfect family life. And you're running a multi-million-pound business. Absolutely fabulous. Absolutely smashing it. So I think you therefore set your own unrealistic goals that you have to do everything. Yeah. And it's just not, it's not healthy. It doesn't. And I've been there. I'm guilty of it. So setting really unrealistic goals.
Imagine if you feel that way. Imagine how young, teenage girls feel. I mean, it's
I know, it's worrying, isn't it? Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So let's, I want to dive into a little bit more, and maybe this is selfishly. So Dana and I, we culture is something that we really focus on. We're not HR people, we're marketing people, turned business owners, right? That's kind of what we are. So, when you said quiet quitting, my heart sank. Because that's like, to me, that would be a failure, right? If someone were, somebody on the team was quiet quitting, it's not only, sad for them that they would feel that they would have to do that, but then, we missed it. What did we miss? Right. So as business owners and as founders, what would be, these are the things that you need. Like, if we don't do anything else, if we don't have the budget to hire Gem right now to come in and do an assessment and all that, what would be like the top couple things that we could do, to make sure we're keeping culture top of mind?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say, it goes back to what I said right at the beginning. Provide your employees with the opportunity to talk, to voice, and to be heard. Now, there's an element to add to that from a psychological safety perspective. And what I mean by psychological safety is providing an environment for your employees to feel that they can speak without there being any consequences of. So which therefore will make sure that you provide an environment where there's innovation, that you're constantly improving, and that people can be their authentic selves. That takes time to build, and it all falls back to trust. That takes a lot of time to foster and nurture, and there are many things that fall into that. But I think there are a couple of things that you as a leader can be looking at, and that is, and this isn't always, sometimes it's frowned upon, but running engagement surveys. Some leaders think, oh God, what's the point? But I think that actually what happens is that they get fatigue of running engagement surveys and not actually actioning off the back of them. So you'll run an engagement survey, but what have you actually done? Have you communicated back to the business, we've heard you, these are the elements we're going to focus on, and actually have you made change? There are so many businesses that will, we run engagement surveys all the time. And I say, can I see it? And then when I see it, I think, none of this big white elephant in the room, we've not dealt with. So let's unpick that and start dealing with that. So, and maybe it's because leaders don't know where to start. And I guess that's the beauty of what I can bring. But I think running an engagement survey and keeping your finger on the pulse of, well, what are our people saying, and being open and honest and just saying, hey, we've heard this. Let's talk it through. What do we need to do to improve these things? And we want to hear your feedback. It might be a case that maybe a couple are run in the first instance where people might not come forward. But I think over time, where they see examples and stories where people have come forward and given ideas and perhaps stepped up and gone, I don't agree with that. And actually that I think could be even better. And actually it's okay. That takes time. And I think what will happen then is you won't have there'll be less quiet quitters because you've given them an avenue to voice. And another way to do that, I guess, is also through making sure that you've got one-to-ones, you've got, so there's that element that I would say is giving your employees a platform to be heard and to actively listen, can I add, which goes back to the making sure that you action off the back of your engagement surveys. The other element, there's so many I could pick. The other element I would say is there's showing appreciation. And what I mean by showing appreciation and making sure that appreciation is habitual within the business is not necessarily leaders of business saying, we are going to recognize or we're going to reward somebody because they have delivered X number. It's more about how can you nurture and foster that peer-to-peer recognition, where I'm saying to Joe, I'm saying, thank you so much for that. What you did there made such a difference. And I really appreciate what you did there. And it becomes much of a habitual peer-to-peer rather than top-down. And sometimes what happens is the top-down, you're waiting for leader of business, just please, my manager, give me some appreciation. They might be busy and might not be used to showing appreciation. The moment you open it up to peer, it changes it. It becomes a bit healthier. Now, to add also to that is if you're going to be looking at appreciation and providing the platform for people to provide peer-to-peer recognition, make sure that it has your company values as infrastructure and as a backdrop. Because what you potentially fall into, and I see falling into, is it becomes a popularity contest where I'm going to say thanks for that because perhaps you're in a position where you can constantly provide a service. So maybe if you're, I don't know, you're in IT or you're in HR, you're in that role of constantly providing a service. And you might find there's somebody else in the business that doesn't get the opportunity to do that, but they are doing loads of really great stuff. If you align it to your company values and the behaviors, and you're putting a spotlight on the good behaviors and the values that are being lived, that's keeping it fair, but also keeping your company culture strong.
Yeah. And allows you to see it even-handedly across all departments, and not pick fate. I think that makes sense. I'm thinking about, shout out to Kim on the HR team.
Oh, really?
Our HR team of one, right? She doesn't really have any peers to shout her out, right? But she does an amazing job. And then you think about client services. We have a Slack channel, I think it's called Props or something like that. And, it is so rewarding to see them, kind of thank each other and call each other out for work done. It's uplifting.
Yeah. And it's running itself. It's when you're not in the room. And that's the beauty of it is that the cultural element, and that's happening without you being there. You're not having to initiate it. And I think that says a lot.
Yeah. They do such a good job on the peer-to-peer stuff and just shouting people out. It's great. I agree with you, Cari. I loved seeing it. So, and it's not managers, like you said, it's not managers starting it. Occasionally it is. It's somebody, but for the most part, it's peers, that was like on a call and saw something, or, a client said something and sharing, and, it's great.
So I'd say those would be my two things.
The engagement survey is really interesting. We've been talking about doing one this year too. And I think my perspective on why leaders probably don't do much with it is I think there's a fear from leaders that they're not going to be able to deliver what the employees want, right? Whether it's cost. And so it's not like, well, we see it, then we have to do something. And what if we can't, right? Because there's always the give and take of, I think, I love to believe that most people are good at heart, right? They want to do these things. I mean, Cari and I want to do so much for the employees. There's only so much the P&L allows, right?
Yeah.
So, and those are real, right? But I also think probably what I'm guessing you would say to this is that there's ways to do things that aren't all tied to budget, right? I think the fear is everyone's going to ask for more vacation or 100%. Something that we just can't do, right? And so I think it's, as leaders, understanding that culture is you've been talking about, is defined by more than those things.
Well, there's so many things that are. And so I produced my own engagement survey that was built in and around looking at factors such as wellness. Yeah. So how are you doing? How are we as a business really focused on nurturing a culture of wellness? I look at things like, well, let's talk about management. How are managers doing? Leadership. How clear are we in our mission, our purpose, and our values? Communication. There's things in there in terms of the physical workspace, but also the virtual workspace as well. So. And also the personal growth piece in there. So there are many factors that all form part of that. And I think what businesses need to be careful of is if they focus too much on salary and you focus too much on benefits, people will only stay for those things. And is that really healthy? There's more to it than that. And that's when it becomes a little bit toxic, because you're only here for the money and here for the paycheck. And are you really here for our mission and our purpose and where we're heading as a business?
Yeah. It's interesting, Dana. I feel like when we do have employees leave, what they are going to miss the most, what they say they're going to miss the most, is their teammates. And so I feel like that's good, right? I mean, because then that means that they're fostering these relationships that feels, like they don't want to let each other down and things like that. Even
more in a remote environment, right? Which is, because we're.
And how good is that for you though? Because if you've had a leaver, and so you're effectively creating advocates, which is going to help your business moving forward, because somebody else wants to come and work for your business. They might end up saying, oh, you should speak to these guys because it's a really great place to work. So that's also going to help. It's all very well doing your internal focus, but it's also about, okay, well, what does that external piece look like? How are we being perceived externally? What's our employer brand? How does that kind of resonate with people? And the more authentic you can be internally means that you're therefore going to get more people externally who want to come and work for your business. And therefore you get boomerangs, and boomerangs are those that have left and then decide to then come back because it was so bloody brilliant working in your business. I
love that. That's amazing. So, wow, this is this stuff I think we could talk about forever, because Dana and I really appreciate your insight. And I have to tell you that we do sometimes get Gemma-isms, from Lindsay, because I think you're her consultant, as she goes off and comes back and goes, what Gem said. And it's like, oh, wow, she's really smart. Yeah.
Does she really? Oh, God. Okay, cool. I'm really going to watch what I say then. Hey.
Well, I think it's more culture related. So, the other stuff we don't have insight into.
Next time you guys are in the UK, we should definitely meet up and go for drinks.
Absolutely.
Probably find
Let's
out
do
more.
that. Let's do that. I love that. So, as we look at time and trying to, make sure that we hit all the key points, why don't you tell us what you're working on? Do you have something cool that our listeners might be interested in hearing about?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. I'm thinking, which one do I talk about? Because I love them all. So I think the element that I'll tell you what, I'll talk about this one. So we are at the moment launching with a particular client. We are launching a 9-day fortnight. Do you know what I mean by 9-day fortnight? You're nodding. This is good. Oh, okay. So this 9-day fortnight.
I think this is like, different work schedule.
Okay.
Yeah. So the reason it came about was because I've been working with this client for a while, and they have what I would call an immense psychologically safe environment within their business. They have spent a lot of time listening, empowering, enabling people within their business. It's an agency. It's just wonderful. It's a really, really great place to work. And we were looking at work-life balance. and we were looking at if we've got the Gen Zs coming through. There were employees who were perhaps looking at working abroad for a period of time. The kind of, I guess, that we talked about it right at the beginning, the shift in terms of what am I expecting from a role within my career, but also I have outside interests as well. But also I've got things like family, etc. So we were looking at, okay, well, what could we possibly look at that would help that? Do we look at maybe core hours? Do we perhaps look at a 4-day week? But actually, the great thing about this business, and the reason I've highlighted it, is because I think that the way they've approached it is really great. They've decided to trial a prototype. And I think that businesses can take a leaf out of that book, because I think sometimes we're so rigid in the way that we should do things that, shall we take that risk? Should we do that? Oh no, I'm not sure we should do that, because that might change things. But I think change is good. And the great thing about this business is they've gone, let's trial it. Let's be honest, open. Let's trial a 6-month period of us doing a 9-day fortnight. Now, 9-day fortnight is over a 2-week period. I can decide when I'm going to do my hours, but I fit all my hours into the 9 days rather than the 10 days. And I will make sure I deliver to ensure that I have that 10th day off. So there's a huge amount of trust that has to be paramount within that. But we've decided we went out to the business and said, who wants to trial it? Who wants to be involved? And there are some people who said, I don't think it's for me. I'm not up for it, which is fine, by the way. Again, highlights how safe that business is. And we are midway through. But the great thing about it is, let's sit in the room and let's discuss what's working, what's not working. Where can we fix that? So they've approached it in very much an open-minded, let's make it work, rather than, nah, that's not going to work. And in agency, it's really difficult to do, isn't it? Because you've got your clients, and you need to make sure that you're delivering to deadlines, etc. So we've worked out a way to do that. Let's look at having an A team and a B team. And the A and B team make sure that we've always got somebody who's available to ensure that client deadlines, client services, etc. isn't impacted. So I've never rolled out a 9-day fortnight before, so I've had to learn a lot about how it's worked, not worked, kind of things you need to be looking at. And it's just really interesting to go on the journey with that client as well, because they're open to it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So It's a pretty cool project we're working on at the moment.
I love that. It's great. Amazing. All right. Last question, because I know we're getting on time here. So we always end with something fun. So what's your guilty pleasure TV show right now? Everyone has to answer this.
My guilty pleasure. So when Lindsay asked me first of all, I was like, oh my God. And she said, Gem, do you know what the worst thing is? I don't know. I've got no idea. And that's made me then question, thinking, how long have I known you, Lindsay? And we don't know this. It's really sad. So have you guys ever heard of The Traitors?
So just literally last week, I was getting my hair done and my hairstylist goes, I'm watching The Traitors. And I was like, what is this? So I have not started it yet. But
what streaming service is it on? What is it on?
It's on the BBC.
It's on, I just looked for it, Carrie. Is it Peacock?
I don't know.
I think is it
Traitors, like TR?
Yeah. I think it's Peacock by
here
us.
We go.
Yeah,
here we go.
Is it Peacock?
The Traitors.
So, it
says BBC
clever.
One, based on, it's a Dutch.
It was originally, yeah.
But now I'm told, Gem, is it true that what
Peacock.
she said is the second season much better than the first? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, the second one much better. And the reason I like it is because of the whole psychology that goes behind it. Because you have it's reality TV, and I don't want to spoil it for you because you're going to watch it.
Yeah.
But you essentially have, the idea is pretty cool in that you've got a group of people who you identify, there are traitors that are identified. Now, those traitors cannot be voted out, but the rest of the group are trying to identify who the traitor is. So you've got and especially because of what I do, I don't know if it's because, the whole building relationships, getting to know people and being open and honest, but I mean, it's quite manipulative in them having to build trust, but the underlying is that they don't want to be found out. And it's very, very, it messes with your head. It's really good. It's very, very clever how it's been done. And at the end of it, they win a load of money. If the traitor wins at the end and they haven't been found out. But the other thing is that the traitors are trying to get the faithfuls voted off. So they will spark off conversations it's just, so that's my guilty pleasure.
And do you know who the traitor is as a viewer?
You always do. As a viewer, you do. Yeah. And that's what makes it even worse, because you think you're just outright lying. And that person's believing you. And that's so bad that they built fake trust. So it's very good. I definitely recommend it. And
it's Peacock, Dana.
Peacock,
Claudia Winkleman, the lady who is the host of it, she's just bloody amazing. She's brilliant. She's fabulous. Very, very funny.
Love it.
It's on my list. I just added it. So I was like, I have to check this out. All right, Cari, what about you? What are you watching right now?
So I am watching Masters of the Air. And it is, it's on Apple, and it is a World War II kind of the boys that were, fighter pilots and aviators. I love Austin Butler. That's like the main thing, but also, it's one that my husband and I can watch together. Right. And so it's one of those that come out every Friday, which, is good, right? Because then you can only watch one episode instead of spending hours watching it. I'm really enjoying that. And, I like the kind of the World War II era stuff. Now, I am also rewatching Schitt's Creek because, I watched it a long time ago, and you forget, right?
It's so clever. It's so good.
It's so clever and like you forget, right? And I'm one I'm a multitasker for that, right? So, I've got all the other stuff going on, and I'm watching it in the background, and it's one that you can do that with.
So good. So clever.
You forget about Eugene Levy, like the way he, it's
very, very, very clever. And some of the sayings that come out of it, you made me want to rewatch it,
actually. So good. I know.
I love
so
it.
good.
Yeah. And Moira, I just can't get enough of her. I just can't get enough of her. Yeah.
She's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. They must have had such a laugh.
I know creating that show had to be so much fun.
Yes, for sure. What about you, Dana?
All right. So I quickly binged Love is Blind season 6 because that is my guilty pleasure for sure. But I just started watching Regime on HBO Max, which has got Kate Winslet.
Love her.
She is amazing in it. And it's...
I've seen it advertised.
Yes. It's sort of a comment. It's like satire-ish, but also like, she's like batshit crazy. Like it's so it is. It's really, so I think there's only 2 episodes out so far. It's like they're releasing them one in a week. But
Hugh Grant's in that too. Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm going to add that. Wow, I got 2 good tips here. See, this is a great question.
Helps fill it up. And all the free time we all have, right?
Exactly.
Which is not
Exactly.
Well, you mentioned about having the TV on at the same time of doing work, and I'm really bad at that. I will be working away, and I'll have it in the background, and I don't. It works, but I can't say it's the most healthy thing to do, is it? But I'm
a late, so then I stay up late to catch up on my TV, and then because you get the kids to bed, and then it's like my husband's asleep. I'm like, oh, good, now I can watch what I want.
My time,
and it's at 11. I'm like starting to watch my shows at 11. That's not great.
Oh my god, what time do you wake up in the morning?
6. Yeah, I need to.
Wow. Yeah, but you're a night owl. It goes back to just then. So it goes. Have you ever heard of chrono working?
No.
So your chronotype. So everybody has chronotypes in terms of when their most productive time of day is of working. And I recently wrote a post on LinkedIn around chrono working and how maybe workplaces should start looking at the most productive times for people to be working, because would you potentially have more engaged, better quality of output because you're not being forced into the 9 till 5.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It's true because I get my, and Cari laughs at me, my time is really I want to work 3 to 7. Like that's my, in the afternoon. I am like, and then, I would much rather sleep in a little later or like get up earlier, but I don't really want to work. Like that's when I want to sit and have my coffee I'm more productive afternoon for sure.
And I am like at 3:00, I'm doing my mindless work, right? Because I am ready to go at 6 a.m. Right. And if I can work between 6 and 8 a.m., I get more done in that 2 hours than I do the entire rest of the day.
It's the thing, isn't it?
Question for you, Jem. Do you think that your chronotype is aligned to when your birth hour is?
Oh, I don't know.
You mean the time of day that you were born? Yeah. I don't know what time of day I was born. Question.
Yeah, because I was born early in the morning. I would say both my kids kind of fall into that as well. So I don't know. It's a question to ponder.
But it's really bad. I don't actually know what time I was born.
I don't either.
Okay. Well, I was born on Christmas Eve, and my mom tells the story about a lady with a pink hat that delivered me. In 1967, I was delivered by a female doctor because my doctor was watching football. He was off watching football because I was born on Christmas Eve. So a lady with a pink hat delivered me
Why a pink hat?
It's just what my mom says. Yeah, it's just what my mom says.
Okay.
You think it would be red and green for Christmas, Cari?
Maybe. Yeah. Well, you sure it wasn't an elf?
Yeah, an elf. You were delivered by an elf.
Possibly. Not Jasmine for sure, Dana, but yes. Love it. Well, this was super fun, Jem. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll definitely ask Linz to set up a girls' time when we're there.
When you're next over, let's go for a drink for sure.
Yeah,
it's really good to see you both.
We'd love that.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Jem.
All right, thanks.